qualitative factors, right? How can yeah, how can we incorporate then these issues? And the other fact, of course, is that in environmental health research, in One Health research, you will also have aspects of science which is extremely important, right? You're working with animals, with species, systems, ecosystems, and then how do you inform that in your social value assessment? Remember, always we talk about scientific value and social value, both as being extremely important when we use this value. And that complexity, how do you keep that in mind? And hence, for us as ethics people who are on ethics committees, do we understand the science enough? And if not, what kind of invited expertise might we be in our ethics committees? Science experts, ecology experts, social science experts, who understand. Should we be thinking about incorporating that? And of course, because a lot of this research is also collaborative, it could be between high-income countries and low-income countries or middle-income countries. It could also be between high-income areas within the same country and low-income areas within the same country, and also higher resourced areas. I would consider Delhi as a higher resourced area for research. Much more funding happening in this area, right? Do we get that same kind of funding in Nagaland, Tripura, Sikkim, where we have colleagues coming from, right? Do we have that same kind of funding in Madhya Pradesh? There is an inequity within our country, right? It's not just high-income country and low-income countries. So how do we ensure that? We also talk about if you're going to conduct research in Bhopal, in Indore, in Agartala, then how do you also ensure that that is done in a way that over time there is capacity built because of emissions, etc. And hence, it's a reminder to us that if we are doing science, we need to do science because a large number of trials are poorly designed. As per WHO data from last year, almost 42% of clinical trials amount to wasted research because they did not do the methodology right, or they did not do the analysis right. So almost 50% of studies are poorly designed, and that might mean again that this is wasted research. So doing good quality, well-planned research is actually important for us. And this is where I think funding bodies can have an important role to play by specifically asking those questions in your applications. How are you minimizing the impact of your research on the environment, right? And how can that be done? So again, this WHO report might be of interest to a lot of you. It speaks to some of these issues that how can we do methodologies which reduce the environmental impact of health research, the climate footprint. In fact, it is one of the 12 guiding principles, right? In 2017, in the new guidelines, as Oli highlighted yesterday as well, the principle of environmental protection is the 12th, the last guiding principle. It's an important aspect of what we think about. But do we, for example, so what are the kind of research in environment? Hazardous chemical disposal, biohazardous material being thrown, single-use plastic cylinders because you're doing blood draws, computing equipment which a lot of us use, AI, which Manjulika will tell you, kind of data centers, the kind of water and electrical supply that they need, the kind of pollution that they cause, etc. So if you're going to use AI-based approaches at the back end, that's going to have some impact on the environment, right? The frequent travel which is there. It could be local travel for data collection. It could also be because all of us want to go to conferences and present all of the. I'm not trying to guilt trip anyone, right? Because I am also part of that ecosystem. I'm also doing this research. But are we conscious? Do we try to reduce this? And what kind of ways can we reduce this? There is also risky science. So there's genetic manipulation happening. Manjulika showed us a movie yesterday which alludes to this. There's recently been a death in China of a child in a gene editing experiment, right? So this is not theoretical. COVID, you will all remember that there was such a lot of controversy. I mean, Anthony Fauci is now suffering through that with the Republicans, right? The lab leak, the Wuhan lab leak hypothesis which was there. Even if we don't buy it at face value, this is something which the public worries about. Now there is also gain of function research which is happening, which could enhance transmissibility or of pathogens. So that's something for us to think of. So maybe we'll stop on your tables to just think through, even if you don't have time for discussion, that own institutions and as ethics committees, you could encourage your researchers to use the environmental impact of their research. Are there practical considerations that you could have in our institutions? And because we are all ethics committee members, specifically in ethics committee discussions, what are the kind of questions we can ask our investigators which could encourage them to start critically engaging with this issue? Okay? For you to take back to your institutions.
Oh, they are capturing all kinds of photos there.
So we get the ethnic picture.
What section is that? No, no, like Bangladesh.
May I invite Dr. Purna Prabhakaran to share ethical aspects and issues which we encounter with the wide spectrum of biology which
pediatrician. Ended up in public health, and so spent the first decade of my career researching with both cohorts and looking at life course approach to chronic disease research, which is why I am in CCDC. But somewhere along the line, when I used to go like a pilgrim to this conference, the World Congress of Developmental Origins of Health and Disease, there's a whole school of researchers. 10 years ago, I realized at these conferences that the international researchers were talking about the environmental risk determinants of child health, growth and development. And I felt that was a big missing piece in India. So I came back, this was 2015, and with support of Indian Academy of Pediatrics and the WHO Collaboration Center on Children's Environmental Health, which was in Australia, I brought together working with World Commerce in India to talk about the importance of environmental health. And just for context, environmental factors are contributing to a quarter of the burden of disease. So how come we did not think of it? And it's doing research around this space, but it still seems to be a very nascent part of even public health capacity building. Even in the organization that I was previously, we had teaching part of public health, and at one location we spent about